The sun rose slowly over the hills of Beersheba, casting long shadows across the tents of Abraham. The camp was quiet, the air cool with morning dew, and only the faint bleating of sheep echoed in the distance. Abraham stood outside his tent, gazing toward the horizon, where the sky burned with gold and crimson. He was an old man now, his beard white as desert sand, yet his eyes still carried the same fire that once looked upon the stars and believed. Through the years, he had seen promises fulfilled, the birth of Isaac, the covenant renewed, and his heart rested in quiet trust. But that morning, the stillness broke with a voice that had once called him from his homeland. The same voice that had guided him through deserts and years of waiting now spoke again, clear, commanding, divine. Abraham. He turned, his heart trembling yet steady. "Here I am," he answered. And then came the words that would shake the earth of his soul. "Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell you of." For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. The voice faded into silence, and the wind whispered through the acacia trees. Abraham's breath caught. His son, the child of promise, the laughter of Sarah's old age, the living proof of God's faithfulness, how could this be asked of him? His hands trembled as he pressed them against his chest. The command was clear, yet it pierced deeper than any blade. Still, beneath the shock, faith began to stir. He remembered that God had never failed him, not once. The same Lord who brought life to a barren womb could also restore it from death. Slowly, painfully, Abraham bowed his head and whispered, "Yes, Lord." That night, he did not sleep. He sat beside the fire, watching its embers fade to ash. Isaac lay nearby, his face peaceful in slumber, unaware of the storm that raged in his father's heart. Abraham lifted his eyes toward the heavens, where the stars glimmered, countless, as God had once promised. "You said my seed would be as these," he murmured. "And you gave me Isaac. You are not a God of lies. So if you ask for him, you will return him." His heart broke and healed in the same breath. When dawn came, he rose with quiet strength, saddled his donkey, and called for 2 of his servants. Then, taking Isaac and the wood for the offering, they set out toward the mountain God had shown him. For 3 days they journeyed through the wilderness, the road long and silent. Each step weighed heavy with purpose. Isaac, strong and bright-eyed, walked beside his father, unaware of the divine secret they carried. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw Mount Moriah rising in the distance, a dark silhouette against the pale sky. His heart ached, yet his faith held firm. He turned to his servants and said, "Stay here with the donkey, the boy and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come again to you." He spoke the words softly, but they carried a power even he could not fully understand. "We will come again to you." Isaac carried the wood upon his shoulders as they climbed the rocky slope. Abraham held the fire and the knife. The boy looked at his father with curious eyes and asked, "My father?" "Here I am, my son," Abraham replied. "Behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering?" The question pierced Abraham's heart, yet his answer came with quiet conviction. "My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering." And they went on together. At last, they reached the place God had revealed. The wind whispered through the mountaintop as Abraham built an altar of stones, his hands steady though his soul quaked within him. He arranged the wood carefully, then turned to Isaac. The boy understood now. There was no fear in his eyes, only trust. Without struggle, he allowed his father to bind him and lay him upon the altar. The world seemed to hold its breath. Abraham raised the knife, his tears falling like rain upon the stones. His voice trembled in prayer, "O Lord, remember your covenant." Then the heavens thundered with a voice that stopped time itself. "Abraham, Abraham!" He froze, the knife suspended in midair. "Here I am," he gasped. "Lay not your hand upon the lad," the angel said, "neither do anything unto him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son from me." The knife fell from his hand, clattering against the stones. Abraham collapsed to his knees, weeping. He looked up, and there, caught by its horns in a thicket, was a ram. Trembling, he untied Isaac and offered the ram instead, his tears mingling with smoke in gratitude. When the fire consumed the sacrifice, Abraham named that place Jehovah-Jireh, the Lord will provide. The angel of the Lord spoke once more, saying, "By myself have I sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son, that in blessing I will bless you, and in multiplying I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven and as the sand upon the seashore." The promise was renewed, now sealed by faith tested through fire. As Abraham and Isaac descended the mountain, the morning light broke over Moriah. The boy walked beside his father, holding his hand. Neither spoke for a time, but the bond between them was stronger than before, forged in obedience and grace. Isaac looked up and smiled faintly. "Father, did God provide?" Abraham squeezed his hand and whispered, "Yes, my son. He always does." The morning after the great test dawned clear and still, the sky stretching wide and blue over the hills of Moriah. Abraham and Isaac walked slowly down from the mountain, the smell of smoke still lingering in the air. Every step they took seemed lighter than the one before, for a burden had been lifted that words could not describe. The boy walked beside his father, glancing up now and then, his young mind turning over the mystery of what had just happened. He had seen the fire, the knife, the altar, and yet, at the last moment, God had provided a ram. Deep inside, he knew his life had been spared for a reason. Abraham's thoughts were silent but full. He replayed the voice that had stopped his hand, the sound that had come not from the earth but from eternity itself. That voice, it was life, mercy, and holiness all at once. He whispered to himself, "Jehovah-Jireh, the Lord will provide." When they reached the camp, Sarah came running to meet them, her heart trembling with fear and relief. She had waited 3 days in sleepless agony, praying to the God who had given her Isaac. When she saw her son alive, her cry turned into laughter mixed with tears. She held him close, unable to speak. Abraham simply nodded toward heaven. "The Lord is faithful," he said. "He tested me, and he renewed his promise." That night, as the stars filled the sky, Abraham went out alone beyond the tents. He knelt beside a small altar he had built years before and lifted his hands. "O Lord," he prayed softly, "you have proven yourself again. You do not desire the death of the promise, but the faith of your servant. I am yours, and all that I have is yours." The Lord's presence drew near, not as thunder or fire, but as stillness deeper than the earth itself. And in that silence, God spoke once more, "By myself have I sworn, said the Lord, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will bless you. Your seed shall be as the stars of heaven and as the sand upon the seashore, and in your seed shall all nations of the earth be blessed." The words filled Abraham's spirit like the sound of rushing waters. He had heard them before, long ago, when he first left his father's house. But now they carried a new weight, sealed in obedience, proven in trust. The covenant had survived the fire. As the days turned to weeks, the story of Moriah spread among Abraham's household. His servants spoke of the ram that appeared in the thicket, of the voice that called from the heavens, of the altar that became a symbol of mercy. Travelers who came through the region would ask, "Is this the place where the Lord provided?" And Abraham would nod, "Yes, it is called Jehovah-Jireh to this day." Yet for Abraham, the meaning went far beyond a single miracle. He began to see, as through a veil, that God had revealed something greater than he could fully grasp, a shadow of redemption yet to come, when another father would offer his only son for the salvation of the world. Isaac grew in wisdom, and his eyes often followed his father when Abraham prayed. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Isaac asked, "Father, why did God test you so?" Abraham smiled gently. "Because faith, my son, is not proven in comfort but in surrender. When we give back to God what we love most, we learn that He alone is our treasure." Isaac pondered these words, realizing that obedience was not a duty but a form of love. Years later, when Abraham walked once more by the oaks of Mamre, he felt the weight of his years but not the weariness of his soul. His faith had become like a river, deep, calm, unbroken. The memory of Moriah was no longer pain but peace. Often he would look toward the mountains and remember the ram, the altar, the mercy. Sometimes he would whisper to the wind, "The Lord provides." And in the whisper of the leaves, it seemed that heaven answered, always. One night, as Abraham sat outside his tent, the sky again was alive with stars. He lifted his eyes, and the promise of long ago seemed to shimmer above him, uncountable, eternal. "How many generations will it take, Lord?" he asked softly. "How far will your covenant reach?" The stars gave no answer, but deep within, his heart knew. From his line would come kings, prophets, and a Savior who would bless all nations. The thought humbled him to the dust. He bowed low and said, "Your faithfulness, O Lord, endures forever." As dawn broke, Abraham called Isaac and his servants. They prepared to move once more, for the Lord had given them peace to dwell again in Beersheba. When they arrived, Abraham built another altar, his third great altar of worship. There, he offered sacrifices of thanksgiving, not for wealth or victory, but for the grace of being known and loved by God. He stood before his household and said, "Children and servants, remember this, obedience opens the way for blessing. Trust Him, even when you do not understand." That evening, as the camp settled, Abraham looked toward the horizon, where the light faded into gold. His life had been a journey of promises, some fulfilled, some still waiting. But he no longer feared the waiting. He had learned that God's timing was not measured by man's heart but by eternal wisdom. As the wind stirred the sand and the stars began to shine, he smiled faintly. "The Lord renews His promise," he whispered. "And I will trust Him until the end." And so, the old patriarch rested beneath the stars that bore witness to his covenant, his heart anchored in faith that reached beyond his years. Somewhere in the distance, the cry of a newborn lamb rose in the night, a reminder that God still provides, just as He always will. the morning sun fell gently over the tents of Hebron, painting the hills of Canaan in soft gold. The years had passed quietly since the day on Mount Moriah, and Abraham's household had grown vast and full of life. Yet among all the laughter of grandchildren and the lowing of herds, the air held a weight of passing time. Sarah, the mother of nations, the woman who had laughed at God's promise and later laughed in its fulfillment, had grown old and frail. Her eyes, once bright as desert stars, were dim now, but her spirit was strong. In her tent she would sit and watch Isaac walk among the flocks, tall and strong, the living proof that God's word never fails. Often she would whisper to her maidens, "Every cry I made in doubt was turned to joy by His mercy." One evening, as the sky blazed red with the coming dusk, Sarah called for Abraham. He entered quietly, his face lined with the years of wandering and wonder. She smiled faintly. "My lord," she said softly, "we have walked far, haven't we?" Abraham took her hand and nodded. "From Ur to Egypt, through famine and promise, we have seen the Lord in every place." She looked beyond him, her gaze fixed on the light that faded beyond the hills. "When I was young," she whispered, "I laughed when God spoke. I thought I was too old, too barren. But He made me a mother when all hope was gone. Never doubt Him, my beloved." Her breath grew shallow, her hand trembled in his. "Promise me," she said, "that you will remember this land, for this is where the promise will live." Abraham's eyes filled with tears. "I promise," he said. And with that, Sarah's eyes closed, her spirit slipping away like a quiet whine through the tent. Abraham sat beside her long into the night, unmoving, listening to the whisper of the desert beyond the canvas walls. Every memory of their journey came flooding back, the first call in Haran, the tents under the stars, the laughter of a child born in old age. He thought of the many times she had doubted, and of how God had turned her doubt to faith. "You were right to laugh," he murmured. "For the Lord has done the impossible." When morning came, he called his servants and tore his robe in mourning. The camp fell silent. From every tent came the sound of weeping. Sarah, the mother of the covenant, was gone. Abraham rose with sorrow but also with strength. He went to the sons of Het, for he was still a stranger in their land, and he sought a burial place. The men of Hebron respected him greatly, for they saw that God was with him in all things. They said, "You are a mighty prince among us, bury your dead in the choicest of our sepulchres." But Abraham bowed low and said, "Let me purchase the cave of Machpelah from Ephron son of Zohar, that I may bury my dead out of my sight." Ephron at first offered it freely, but Abraham insisted on paying the full price, 400 shekels of silver, so that no man could say it was given by favor. The transaction was witnessed before all, and the field, the trees, and the cave became Abraham's possession, the first piece of the promised land he would ever own. When all was done, Abraham carried Sarah's body to the cave of Machpelah. He placed her gently upon the stone, and the echoes of his footsteps lingered like a prayer. He stood in the doorway of the tomb, his heart torn between grief and gratitude. "My love," he whispered, "you believed in the end. Sleep now in peace, for this land, this very earth beneath us, is the beginning of God's forever promise." He sealed the cave, and the silence that followed was sacred. The wind outside sighed through the oaks of Mamre, carrying the sound of eternity. In the days that followed, Abraham wandered through the fields of Hebron, remembering her laughter, her words, her faith. Each dawn he would rise and look toward the tomb, whispering a blessing. Isaac often joined him, silent beside his father, sensing that something greater than death had happened, that faith itself had planted roots in this soil. Abraham would rest his hand upon Isaac's shoulder and say, "Never forget, my son, this is the land the Lord has sworn to give you and your seed after you." Even when all seems lost, trust his promise. That night, under a canopy of endless stars, Abraham sat alone by the fire. He gazed upward, the constellations shimmering like the countless descendants yet to come. His heart, though heavy with loss, burned with peace. He had learned that God's promises did not die with those who believed them, they lived on, carried through generations, watered by faith and obedience. "Sarah," he whispered to the night, "your laughter will echo through eternity." The years would continue to pass, but Abraham's faith only grew stronger. Whenever travelers asked about the cave in the field of Machpelah, he would say, "It is not merely a tomb, it is a promise kept." And those who heard would bow their heads, sensing that they stood on holy ground, the place where love, loss, and divine faithfulness met. The years after Sarah's passing moved slowly, marked by quiet mornings and long evenings under the ancient oaks of Mamre. Abraham was now very old, his beard like snow and his voice soft with age, yet his eyes still shone with purpose. The covenant of God was alive within him, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. But one concern weighed upon his spirit: Isaac, the son of promise, was still unmarried. Abraham knew that the blessing must continue through Isaac's line, but not among the people of Canaan, whose gods were false and whose hearts were far from the Lord. So one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, he called his most trusted servant, Eliezer of Damascus, to his tent. The servant bowed low, his loyalty unwavering through decades of service. Abraham spoke solemnly, "I am old, and the Lord has blessed me in all things. But I will not have my son take a wife from among the daughters of the Canaanites. Swear to me that you will go to my country, to my kindred, and find a wife for my son Isaac." Eliezer's brow furrowed. "My lord," he said gently, "what if the woman will not follow me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to your homeland?" Abraham's eyes, though dim with age, flashed with conviction. "See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and who spoke to me and swore to give this land to my descendants, he will send his angel before you. You will take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman is unwilling to come, you will be released from this oath." Then Abraham placed his hand upon the servant's head and blessed him. "The God who has guided my steps will guide yours also." So the next morning, Eliezer gathered 10 camels, gifts of gold, silver, and fine linen, and set out for the city of Nahor in Mesopotamia. The journey was long, the desert harsh, but his heart was steadfast. He remembered his master's faith and prayed silently as the camels trod through dust and wind. When at last he reached the city, the sun was setting, and the wells outside the walls came alive with the sound of women drawing water. Eliezer dismounted by the well and bowed his head. "O Lord God of my master Abraham," he prayed, "I pray you, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master. Behold, I stand here by the well, and the daughters of the city come out to draw water. Let it be that the young woman to whom I say, 'Let down your pitcher,' I pray you, that I may drink, and she shall say, 'Drink, and I will give your camels also,' let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac." Before he had even finished speaking, the sound of gentle footsteps approached. A young woman came to the well, her beauty radiant yet modest, her movements graceful like water flowing from a spring. She carried a pitcher upon her shoulder, and the light of evening touched her face with gold. Eleazar's heart quickened. She went down to the well, filled her pitcher, and came up again. Eleazar ran to meet her and said, "Let me, I pray you, drink a little water from your pitcher." She smiled kindly and said, "Drink, my lord." As he drank, she added, "I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking." At once she ran to the well and drew again and again until all the camels were satisfied. Eleazar watched in awe, silent, wondering if this could truly be the sign he had prayed for. When she had finished, he took from his satchel a golden nose ring and 2 bracelets and gave them to her. "Whose daughter are you?" he asked softly. "Is there room in your father's house for us to lodge?" She replied, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore unto Nahor." Eleazar's heart leapt, she was of Abraham's own kin. He bowed his head right there by the well and worshipped. "Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his mercy and truth. Being in the way, the Lord led me to my master's family." The young woman ran to her mother's house and told all these things. Her brother Laban came quickly to meet Eleazar, seeing the ring and bracelets upon his sister's hands. "Come in, blessed of the Lord," said Laban. "Why do you stand outside? I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." The servant entered, and they set food before him, but he said, "I will not eat until I have told my errand." So he spoke all that had happened, the oath, the journey, the prayer at the well, and the sign that had come to pass. When he finished, Bethuel and Laban answered, "The thing proceeds from the Lord, we cannot speak unto you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as the Lord has spoken." That night they feasted, and in the morning Eleazar rose early, eager to return. But Rebekah's mother said, "Let her stay with us a few days, at least 10. The servant replied gently, "Do not delay me, seeing the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." They called Rebekah and said, "Will you go with this man?" And she answered simply, "I will go." So they blessed her, saying, "Our sister, be the mother of thousands of millions, and let your seed possess the gates of those who hate them." Rebekah rose, her maids with her, and mounted the camels. The caravan moved through the desert once more, but this time Eleazar's heart was light, filled with gratitude and awe. Meanwhile, in the fields of Canaan, Isaac was walking alone at evening, meditating under the open sky. He lifted his eyes and saw the camels coming. Rebekah lifted her eyes also, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted and covered herself with a veil. Eleazar came forward and told Isaac all things that he had done. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and she became his wife. He loved her deeply, and through her, the comfort that had left him after Sarah's death returned. And there, beneath the same stars that had once shone on Abraham's promise, the covenant continued, quiet, steadfast, eternal. The years drifted by like the desert wind, soft and steady, carrying the echoes of laughter, prayers, and promises fulfilled. Abraham, now near the end of his days, sat before his tent beneath the oaks of Mamre, gazing at the horizon where heaven met the hills of Canaan. His face was lined with the marks of time, but his eyes still shone with quiet faith. Around him the camp was alive, servants tending the flocks, children playing near the wells, the fragrance of bread rising from the fires. Isaac and Rebekah walked often among the tents, their bond strong and full of peace. And as Abraham watched them, he felt both contentment and purpose, knowing that the covenant of God now rested upon his son. The Lord had kept every promise, the land, the seed, and the blessing that would one day reach all nations. But there was one last chapter to write, a final act of faith before the eternal rest. For though Abraham was satisfied in years, his heart remained open to the voice of the Almighty. He had remarried Keturah, and she bore him sons, Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua, and through them, nations too would rise. Yet the blessing, the sacred promise of the covenant, belonged to Isaac alone. Abraham gathered his household and called for parchment and witnesses, ensuring that all would know the will of the Lord. To Isaac, he said, "I give all that I have, for through him shall the promise stand forever." To the sons of his concubines he gave gifts and sent them eastward, away from Isaac, into the lands beyond the wilderness, where their tribes would dwell. The old patriarch often sat in the evenings beside Isaac, telling stories of his journeys, of Uar, of the stars that God once told him to count, of Egypt, and of that sacred mountain where faith had triumphed over fear. Isaac listened in reverent silence, his heart burning with awe for the God of his father. "Remember, my son," Abraham would say, "the Lord's promise is greater than our understanding. Obey him in all things, even when his ways are hidden, and you will find peace." Rebekah, sitting nearby, would listen too, her eyes soft with gratitude for the faith that now guided her own life. One night, as the wind carried the scent of myrrh and olive from the hills, Abraham rose from his rest and stepped outside his tent. The stars shone in their endless host, as brilliant as the night long ago when God had told him, "So shall your descendants be." His heart filled with joy and reverence. "O Lord," he whispered, "you have kept every word you spoke to me. You took me from the land of my fathers and gave me this inheritance. You promised a son, and you gave me Isaac. You tested me, and you provided. You are faithful beyond measure." Tears filled his eyes as he raised his hands to heaven. "Let my life be a testimony of your goodness." The next morning, Abraham called Isaac to his side. The young man knelt, and Abraham placed his trembling hands upon his head. "My son," he said, "the Lord of heaven and earth, who called me from Uar, bless you and keep you. May his covenant rest upon you and your children after you. Walk before him and be perfect, and he will prosper your way. Trust him in famine and in plenty, in sorrow and in joy. The Lord will be your shield, your exceeding great reward." Isaac bowed low, tears glistening on his cheeks. "I will remember, Father," he whispered. Abraham smiled faintly. "Then my work is done." As the days grew shorter and his strength waned, Abraham withdrew often to a quiet place near the field of Machpelah, where Sarah rested. He would sit by the entrance to the cave, his staff beside him, and speak softly as though she could still hear. "The Lord has been good to us, my love," he would say. "The promise lives on in our son. You were right to believe, even when belief was hard." Sometimes, as the evening light settled upon the hills, it seemed the air shimmered with unseen presence, the peace of a life fulfilled. When the final day came, the camp was hushed. Abraham lay upon his bed, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow but steady. Isaac sat beside him, holding his hand. The old man's lips moved in prayer. "O Lord, my shepherd, who has led me all my days, now lead me to the place of rest. I go to my fathers, to the land beyond promise, but my spirit rejoices in your faithfulness." His voice faded into silence, his body still, and with one final breath, Abraham gave up his spirit into the hands of the God who had called him so long ago. Isaac wept for many days, and Rebekah comforted him. Then together with Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn, he buried their father in the cave of Machpelah beside Sarah. The field and the cave became a lasting memorial, a place where heaven had touched earth through faith. Afterward, Isaac stood before the tomb and looked to the sky, where the stars gleamed like countless promises still unfolding. "The Lord has been faithful," he said quietly, "and his covenant endures forever." And so, Abraham's journey ended not in sorrow but in victory. His life, woven with faith, obedience, and divine grace, became the foundation of nations and the beginning of redemption's story. His name would be remembered throughout generations, not merely as the father of Isaac, but as the friend of God. The days after Abraham's death brought a deep silence upon the land. The tents that once echoed with the patriarch's voice now seemed subdued, as if the very earth mourned the passing of God's friend. Yet amidst the stillness, life went on, and the covenant did not fade. Isaac stood often by the field of Machpelah, gazing at the stones that marked his father's resting place. "The Lord was with him," he would whisper, "and the Lord will be with me." Rebekah, his faithful wife, stood by his side, her eyes reflecting the same quiet strength. Together they carried the promise forward, not through grand declarations, but through steady faith and obedience. The God of Abraham had become the God of Isaac, and the flame of the covenant burned anew. Isaac's life was simpler than his father's. He did not travel as far, nor did he build many altars, yet his heart was steady and faithful. The Lord had promised to bless him in the land, and so he remained in Canaan, tending his flocks and working the soil. The land, however, was not always kind. In time, famine struck, drying the rivers and withering the crops. Isaac thought of going down into Egypt, as his father had done before him, but one night the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Do not go down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell you of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For unto you and your seed I will perform the oath which I swore unto Abraham your father." Isaac woke with awe and conviction. The same God who had guided Abraham was now guiding him. He built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord, offering sacrifice and thanksgiving. So Isaac dwelled in Gerar, in the land of the Philistines. Like his father before him, he found himself caught between fear and faith. Rebekah was beautiful, and Isaac, fearing for his life, told the men of the place that she was his sister. But in time, Abimelech, the king of Gerar, looked out of his window and saw Isaac caressing Rebekah tenderly. The truth was revealed. The king summoned Isaac and said, "Behold, she is your wife." "Why did you say, 'She is my sister'?" Isaac answered, "Because I said, lest I die for her." Abimelech rebuked him but decreed that no man should harm him or his wife, saying, "He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." And the Lord blessed Isaac mightily. He sowed in the land and reaped 100-fold that same year, for the Lord prospered him. His flocks multiplied, his servants increased, and soon the Philistines began to envy him. they stopped up the wells which Abraham's servants had dug, filling them with earth. Then Abimelech said, "Go from us, for you are mightier than we." Isaac departed and pitched his tents in the valley of Gerar, and there he dug again the wells of water that had been stopped up. His servants found a spring of living water, but the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's men, saying, "The water is ours." So he called the well Ezek, meaning contention. They dug another, and again there was strife, so he named it Sitnah, enmity. Then they dug a third well, and no one quarreled over it. Isaac called it Rehoboth, saying, "Now the Lord has made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." That night, as the stars spread across the sky, the Lord appeared to him once more and said, "I am the God of Abraham your father. Fear not, for I am with you and will bless you, and multiply your seed for my servant Abraham's sake." Isaac fell to his knees in worship and built an altar there, calling upon the name of the Lord. The covenant that began with his father now lived fully within him. He could feel its weight and wonder, a promise too vast for one lifetime, stretching toward eternity. The next morning, as the sun rose over the valley, Abimelech came to him with his captain and counselors. Isaac was surprised and asked, "Why do you come to me, seeing you hate me and have sent me away from you?" Abimelech answered, "We saw plainly that the Lord is with you. Let there now be an oath between us, that you will do us no harm, as we have not touched you." Isaac prepared a feast, and they ate and drank together. The next day they swore peace, and Abimelech departed in friendship. That very same day, Isaac's servants came running, shouting, "We have found water." He called the place Sheba, oath, and the city that grew there would later be known as Beersheba, the well of the oath. Through all these things, Isaac came to understand that the Lord's blessing was not earned by striving but received by trust. His life was quieter than Abraham's, yet no less important in God's story. He was the bridge between promise and fulfillment, a living link between generations. And though he did not build great monuments or conquer lands, his legacy was peace, faith, and the steady endurance of hope. That night, as the wind whispered through the tents and the stars shimmered above, Isaac knelt once more and prayed. "O God of my father Abraham, you have been faithful to every word. You gave me this land, you blessed me with Rebekah, and you have renewed the covenant. May my children walk in your ways, as I have walked in the light of your promise." The desert was silent, but the heavens seemed to hum with unseen praise. And in that silence, the covenant continued, unbroken, eternal, alive. The story of Isaac and Rebekah unfolded quietly in the land of Canaan, where the tents of the covenant stood between the rolling hills and the wells of promise. The years passed peacefully, yet a shadow lingered. Rebekah bore no children. The same sorrow that had once touched Sarah's heart now visited her. Day after day, she prayed beneath the oaks, her voice rising like incense toward the heavens. Isaac, remembering his father's faith, also pleaded with God on her behalf. "O Lord," he prayed, "you who gave life to the barren womb of my mother, remember my wife, and let your promise continue through her." The Lord heard Isaac's prayer, and one morning Rebekah felt the first stirring of life within her. But the joy soon turned to confusion, for the children within her struggled fiercely, as though two nations warred in her womb. Troubled, she sought the Lord directly. She withdrew to a quiet place, the desert wind whispering through the acacia trees, and fell to her knees. "O God of Abraham and Isaac," she cried, "if it is well with me, why do I feel this struggle inside me? Then the voice of the Lord came to her, "Calm yet filled with power, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples shall be separated from your body, 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Rebekah bowed her head in awe and fear. The prophecy echoed within her, mysterious and heavy with destiny. She did not yet understand what it meant, but she knew that her children were marked by God's hand. The months passed, and the time of birth came. The tent was filled with the cries of women and the sounds of life breaking into the world. The first to emerge was a child covered in red hair, strong and wild, and they called his name Esau, meaning hairy. But as the second came forth, his tiny hand grasped his brother's heel, a sign of striving yet to come. They called his name Jacob, meaning the one who grasps or supplanter. When Rebekah held them in her arms for the first time, she felt both joy and wonder. She looked into Esau's fierce eyes and Jacob's calm, searching gaze, and she knew that both would shape the destiny of nations. As the boys grew, their differences became clear. Esau was a man of the field, strong, impulsive, and wild like the desert wind. He hunted with skill, his hands rough and his heart untamed. Jacob, by contrast, was quiet and thoughtful, dwelling in the tents, tending the flocks, and learning the ways of God from his mother. Isaac loved Esau because of the game he brought, the taste of the hunt reminding him of his own youth. But Rebekah loved Jacob, drawn to his gentle spirit and his sense of purpose. The prophecy still lingered in her mind, "The older shall serve the younger." One evening, as the sun fell behind the hills and the air filled with the scent of stew simmering in the tent, Jacob sat stirring the pot while Esau stumbled in from the fields, weary and hungry. "Feed me, I pray you," Esau said roughly, "for I am faint." Jacob looked at him with calm eyes. "Sell me your birthright today," he said. Esau laughed bitterly. "Behold, I am at the point to die, what profit shall this birthright do to me?" Jacob held his gaze. "Swear to me this day." And Esau, driven by hunger, swore and sold his birthright for a meal of lentil stew and bread. As he ate, the weight of what he had done meant nothing to him, but heaven took note. For in that moment, the covenant's path began to shift from the elder to the younger, just as the Lord had spoken. The days turned to years, and the tension between the brothers grew. Jacob remained in the tents, thoughtful and cunning, while Esau roamed the wilds, strong but careless of spiritual things. Isaac, now old and his eyes dim with age, began to prepare for the end of his days. He called Esau, his firstborn, and said, "My son." "Here I am," Esau answered. "Behold now," said Isaac, "I am old and do not know the day of my death. Take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field to hunt game for me. Make me savory food, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless you before I die." Esau nodded eagerly and went out. But Rebekah heard all that Isaac had spoken. Her heart stirred with the memory of God's prophecy, that the younger would rule the elder. She called Jacob to her side. "Listen, my son," she said urgently, "I heard your father speak to Esau, saying he will bless him before he dies. Now, obey my voice. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make savory food for your father as he loves. You shall bring it to him that he may bless you before his death." Jacob hesitated. "My brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am smooth. My father may feel me and curse me instead." Rebekah replied firmly, "Upon me be your curse, my son, only obey my voice." And so began the deception that would change their lives forever, a story not of malice, but of divine mystery, where human flaws met the unfolding of God's plan. For even through trickery and fear, the Lord's purpose would prevail, shaping the destiny of Israel through the hands of those he chose. The air in Isaac's tent was heavy with the scent of age and memory. The flicker of oil lamps cast long shadows on the walls as the old patriarch lay upon his bed, his eyes dim with blindness. He felt the weight of years upon him and the fading warmth of life, yet one task remained unfinished, the passing of the blessing. It was the same blessing given by Abraham, the covenant of God himself, promising land, descendants, and divine favor. Isaac's heart longed to seal that promise upon his firstborn son, Esau, whose strength and vigor reminded him of his own youth. But unseen by him, divine providence was already shaping a different destiny. Outside the tent, Rebekah moved swiftly, her heart racing. She had heard Isaac's words to Esau and knew that the moment had come. The prophecy of the Lord still echoed in her soul, "The elder shall serve the younger." She could not stand by and watch the covenant pass to the wrong son, not when heaven had already spoken. She called Jacob into her tent, her voice trembling with urgency. "My son," she said, "I heard your father speak to Esau. He will bless him before his death. Now listen to me. Go to the flock and bring me 2 good young goats, and I will prepare the savory food your father loves. You will take it to him, and he will bless you instead of your brother." Jacob stared at her in disbelief. "Mother, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am smooth-skinned. My father may feel me, and I will seem to him as a deceiver. I shall bring a curse upon myself instead of a blessing." Rebekah placed her hands firmly upon his shoulders, her eyes fierce and unwavering. "Upon me be your curse, my son. Only obey my voice." Her faith in God's purpose was stronger than her fear of man's judgment. Jacob hesitated, then nodded. He fetched the goats, and Rebekah prepared them with skill, seasoning the meat just as Isaac liked it. She took Esau's best garments, rich with the scent of the fields, and put them on Jacob. Then she covered his hands and neck with the skins of the goats so that he would feel rough to the touch. When all was ready, she placed the dish and the bread into Jacob's hands. "Go now," she whispered, "and may the Lord guide your steps." Jacob entered his father's tent, his heart pounding like thunder. "My father," he said softly. Isaac stirred. "Here I am." "Who are you, my son?" Jacob swallowed hard. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you asked. Sit up and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me." Isaac frowned slightly. "How is it that you have found it so quickly, my son?" Jacob's voice trembled as he replied, "Because the Lord your God brought it to me." The words hung in the air, a lie cloaked in the language of faith. Isaac's heart stirred uneasily. "Come near, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are truly Esau." Jacob stepped closer, and Isaac reached out his trembling hands, feeling the skins upon his neck and arms. "The voice is Jacob's," Isaac murmured, "but the hands are the hands of Esau." Still uncertain, he asked again, "Are you indeed my son Esau?" Jacob answered, "I am." So Isaac ate of the food and drank the wine, and when he had finished, he said, "Come near and kiss me, my son." Jacob leaned forward, and Isaac smelled the scent of Esau's garments, the fragrance of the fields blessed by the Lord. His doubts melted away. He lifted his hands and spoke the blessing. See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone that curses you, and blessed be he that blesses you. The words, once spoken, could not be undone. The covenant had passed to Jacob, as heaven had decreed. No sooner had he left the tent than Esau returned, his arms full of game, his heart eager for his father's favor. He prepared the food quickly and entered the tent with joy. Let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. Isaac froze. Who are you? Esau replied proudly, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. The blood drained from Isaac's face. He trembled violently. Who? Where is he that has taken venison and brought it to me? I have eaten of it before you came and have blessed him, and he shall be blessed. Esau's cry of anguish pierced the air like a blade. Bless me, even me also, O my father. Isaac's heart broke, but the blessing was sealed. Your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing. Esau wept bitterly. Is he not rightly named Jacob? He has supplanted me these 2 times, he took away my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing. He pleaded, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Isaac's voice was weary, sorrowful. Behold, I have made him lord over you, and all his brethren I have given to him for servants. What shall I do now for you, my son? Esau wept still, and Isaac said, Behold, your dwelling shall be away from the fatness of the earth, and by your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. Yet it shall come to pass when you grow restless, that you shall break his yoke from your neck. From that day, Esau hated Jacob. His grief turned to rage, and he said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are near, then I will kill my brother Jacob. But Rebekah heard of his plan and warned Jacob. Flee to my brother Laban in Haran, she said urgently, and stay with him until your brother's anger turns away. She blessed him and watched him go, her heart heavy yet certain that God's plan was unfolding exactly as he had spoken. And thus, through deception and destiny intertwined, the covenant passed to Jacob, the chosen heir of promise, not because of his cunning, but because the Lord had chosen him before he was born. For God's purpose stands not by human merit, but by his sovereign will. The night fell heavy upon the hills of Canaan as Jacob fled from his brother's wrath. The stars above him burned bright and distant, silent witnesses to a story far greater than the fear that drove him. His mother's words echoed in his mind, Flee to my brother Laban until your brother's anger turns away. The desert wind stung his face, and his feet ached from the rocky paths, but he did not stop. Each step carried him farther from home, from his father's blessing, from the warmth of Rebekah's tent. Yet though he felt utterly alone, heaven watched. For this journey was not an escape, it was a calling. When night came, Jacob found a lonely place in the wilderness. The air was still, save for the rustle of dry grass and the cry of distant beasts. Weary, he gathered stones for a pillow and lay down beneath the stars. His heart was heavy with guilt and fear, yet exhaustion overcame him, and he slept. And as he slept, he dreamed. The sky opened before him, and he saw a ladder set upon the earth, reaching up to heaven. Angels of God ascended and descended upon it, their forms radiant and terrible in glory. Above them stood the Lord himself, and his voice filled the night like thunder made gentle. I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon you lie, I will give to you and to your descendants. Your seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and in your seed shall all families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you again into this land. I will not leave you until I have done that which I have spoken to you. Jacob awoke trembling. The stars seemed brighter than before, the ground beneath him sacred. Surely the Lord is in this place, he whispered, and I knew it not. Fear and wonder mingled within him. How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. He rose early in the morning, took the stone that had been his pillow, and set it upright as a pillar. Pouring oil upon it, he consecrated it and called the place Bethel, house of God. Then Jacob vowed a vow, saying, If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothes to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth unto you. With the morning light, Jacob rose renewed in spirit. The fear that had once gripped him had turned into a strange, burning hope. The God of his fathers had spoken to him directly, not as the son of Isaac or the grandson of Abraham, but as Jacob, chosen and known. Each step from that day forward carried him not in flight but in purpose. He journeyed toward Haran, his heart filled with faith and expectation. The road was long, winding through barren plains and past rivers that shimmered beneath the sun. Days turned into weeks, and at last, he saw in the distance the green pastures of the east. There, beside a well covered with a large stone, shepherds gathered with their flocks. Jacob greeted them and asked, My brothers, from where are you? They answered, We are from Haran. His heart leapt. Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? We know him, they said. And behold, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. Jacob turned and saw her, Rachel, radiant in the golden light of the morning, leading her father's flock with grace and strength. She approached, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Jacob watched her, struck by her beauty, but also by something deeper, a sense of divine purpose. When she reached the well, Jacob stepped forward, rolled away the heavy stone by himself, and watered her flock. Rachel stood astonished. Then Jacob, overcome with emotion, wept and kissed her hand. I am Jacob, son of Rebekah, your father's sister. Rachel's eyes widened in joy, and she ran to tell her father. When Laban heard of Jacob's arrival, he ran to meet him and embraced him warmly. Surely you are my bone and my flesh, he said, and brought him to his home. For a month Jacob stayed there, working among the flocks, his eyes always drawn to Rachel. Her kindness and laughter eased the ache of his long journey. Laban saw this and said, Because you are my kinsman, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Jacob's answer was firm and full of love. I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Laban smiled slyly. It is better that I give her to you than to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had for her was great. and though he was far from home, carrying the memory of deceit and the burden of exile, he had found a new beginning. God's promise was alive within him, growing stronger with every trial, every sunrise, every breath. The days in Haran unfolded beneath the golden sun, and Jacob labored with steadfast hands and a hopeful heart. His love for Rachel grew with every passing moment. She was the light that softened his exile, the promise that gave meaning to his toil. Each morning, he rose with the shepherds, guiding Laban's flocks across the green hills. The bleating of sheep and the rustle of the wind became the rhythm of his life, and though the work was hard, the thought of Rachel's smile made the hours swift. She would often come to the fields, her laughter mingling with the song of birds, and Jacob would find strength anew. The 7 years he promised seemed but a handful of days, for love has no measure in time when it is pure and patient. Rachel, too, had come to love Jacob deeply. She saw in him not merely a man of labor, but a man of faith, one who spoke of angels in dreams, of a God who had promised him a future greater than his past. Their bond grew quietly under the watch of the stars, unspoken yet certain, like the flow of a river that knows its course. But Laban, cunning and watchful, saw opportunity in Jacob's devotion. He was a man of profit and deception, one who knew how to twist the desires of others to his gain. While Jacob dreamed of love, Laban plotted in silence. When the 7 years were complete, Jacob came to Laban and said, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her." Laban smiled broadly and agreed, arranging a great feast for all the men of the place. The music played, torches burned through the night, and joy filled the air. But when darkness fell and the veil of night concealed all things, Laban brought his elder daughter, Leah, to Jacob instead of Rachel. Her face was hidden beneath heavy veils, and Jacob, weary from wine and celebration, did not see the deception. Morning came. The light of dawn crept into the tent, and Jacob stirred, reaching to touch the face of his beloved, only to find another. His heart froze. Behold, it was Leah. He rose in fury and went to Laban. "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" Laban's expression was calm, almost amused. "It must not be so done in our country," he said, "to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill Leah's week, and we will give you Rachel also for the service of another 7 years." Jacob stood silent for a long time, his heart torn between love and outrage. Yet his love for Rachel was steadfast, he would not abandon her. "So be it," he said at last. He fulfilled the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him Rachel to wife also, along with her maid Bilhah. The wedding was smaller, quieter, but when Jacob finally looked into Rachel's eyes, all anger melted away. For though men deceived, God's plan endured. Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served Laban yet another 7 years. But tension began to grow in the house of Laban. Leah, unloved and sorrowful, wept often in secret. Yet the Lord saw her tears and opened her womb, while Rachel remained barren. Leah bore sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, and with each child, she hoped for her husband's affection. "Now," she said after the birth of Judah, "I will praise the Lord." And though Jacob's heart belonged to Rachel, Leah's faith and strength became part of the foundation of the tribes of Israel. Meanwhile, Rachel's longing deepened. Her joy turned to envy as she watched her sister cradle one child after another. "Give me children," she cried to Jacob, "or I die." Jacob's voice rose in pain. "Am I in God's stead, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" Rachel, desperate, gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife, that she might bear children through her. Bilhah bore Dan and Naphtali, and Rachel said, "With great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed." Leah, seeing this, gave her maid Zilpah to Jacob also, and she bore Gad and Asher. The rivalry between the sisters filled the tents with tension and sorrow, yet through it all, God's hand was weaving something eternal. The house of Jacob was growing, and though the path was fraught with strife, it was through these imperfect lives that the promise would live on. Years passed, and Jacob became wise to Laban's cunning ways. He worked faithfully, yet his wages were changed time and again. Still, the Lord prospered him. The flocks multiplied, and Jacob's wealth increased, for the blessing of God rested upon all he touched. He remembered the dream at Bethel, the ladder to heaven, the voice of the Lord saying, "I am with you." Though surrounded by deceit and struggle, he began to see the purpose behind his trials, that through faith and endurance, the promise would not fail. And as the sun set over the hills of Haran, Jacob would sometimes walk alone among the flocks, lifting his eyes to the sky. The stars still shone with the same brightness that once guided his grandfather Abraham, and he whispered softly, "O Lord, you are faithful. Even when men deceive, you fulfill your word." The wind stirred the grass, as though heaven itself answered. 7 years became 14, and Jacob's love endured through them all. His life was not what he had imagined when he fled from Canaan, but his heart was stronger, his faith deeper. He had learned that love and blessing are not born of ease, but of patience, faith, and the unseen hand of God shaping destiny. The tents of Jacob stood vast and full of life, yet beneath the hum of children's laughter and the lowing of flocks, there was tension that never slept. Leah and Rachel, two sisters bound to one man, lived beneath the same roof yet carried wounds that no words could heal. Leah had given Jacob many sons, but she remained unloved. Rachel, though the beloved wife, bore none. And so, the rivalry between them grew like thorns around the heart of the family. Yet through their struggle, God was quietly fulfilling his promise, weaving the foundation of the tribes of Israel out of the threads of jealousy, pain, and faith. Leah sat one evening outside her tent, her hands busy weaving linen, but her eyes distant. She watched Jacob playing with little Judah, the child laughing as his father lifted him high into the warm evening light. A deep ache filled her chest. "He loves me not," she whispered, "yet the Lord has seen me." The next morning, she discovered she was with child again. When her 5th son was born, she said, "God has given me my hire, because I have given my handmaid to my husband." She named him Issachar. Soon after, she bore another son, Zebulun, saying, "Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons." And later, she bore a daughter, Dinah, whose story would one day bring both sorrow and justice. Meanwhile, Rachel's heart burned with longing. The joy she once shared with Jacob was dimmed by her emptiness. "I have no child," she often cried to the heavens, "no fruit from my womb. Am I forgotten, O Lord?" Her tears fell into the dust, and though she envied her sister, she also envied her sister's faith. Leah had found comfort in God's compassion, while Rachel wrestled in silence. Yet the Lord, who sees the secret pain of every heart, was not far from her. One night, as she prayed beside her tent, the cool wind brushed against her face, and peace settled upon her spirit. The next morning, she felt the stirring of life within her, and her joy burst forth like water in the desert. God has taken away my reproach, she said, and I will name him Joseph, saying, the Lord shall add to me another son. At last, Rachel had borne a child, the son of Jacob's deepest love, the beginning of new hope. Jacob looked upon the newborn and saw in him the reflection of both promise and providence. His heart lifted, and he said, the God of my fathers has remembered me. But even as joy filled the tents, Jacob's thoughts turned toward home. 20 years had passed since he fled from Esau's wrath. His flocks had multiplied, his family had grown, but the land of Canaan, the land of promise, still called to him. Yet Laban's shadow loomed large, for the man's greed knew no bounds. Laban had grown rich because of Jacob's labor, and though his words were friendly, his eyes were full of calculation. He had changed Jacob's wages 10 times, always scheming to keep him bound. But God was with Jacob, blessing him even through deceit. The flocks of spotted and speckled sheep, which Laban had marked as Jacob's wages, multiplied beyond measure, while Laban's herds diminished. Whispers spread among Laban's sons, Jacob has taken all that was our father's. Envy stirred in their hearts, and Jacob saw that the man who once welcomed him now looked upon him with resentment. Then the Lord spoke to Jacob in a dream. Return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. Jacob rose early and called Rachel and Leah to the field, away from the ears of Laban's servants. They came, their veils fluttering in the morning wind, their faces marked by years of rivalry and shared pain. I see your father's countenance, Jacob said, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know how I have served him faithfully, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. When he said, the speckled shall be your wages, all the flocks bore speckled. When he said, the ring-straked shall be your wages, all the flocks bore ring-straked. God has taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. Rachel and Leah looked at one another, and for the first time in many years, there was no bitterness between them. Leah spoke first. Is there any portion for us or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not counted as strangers? For he has sold us and devoured our money. Rachel nodded, her voice steady. Whatever God has said to you, do it. In that moment, the two sisters, long divided by envy, stood united, not by love for each other, but by faith in the God who ruled over their lives. That night, Jacob gathered his household, his children, his servants, and all his flocks, and prepared to leave Haran. The moon rose high, silver upon the desert, as the caravan moved quietly toward the west. Rachel lingered behind for a moment and took her father's household idols, hiding them among the camels' packs, a sign that though faith had taken root, remnants of the old ways still clung to her heart. Then she mounted her camel, and they set forth into the unknown. The rivalry that had once torn the sisters apart now faded into the distance, replaced by a shared journey toward destiny. For God had used even their pain to shape his people. Leah's sons would become the strength of Israel, priests, warriors, and kings, while Rachel's children would carry the mantle of favor and redemption. And through them all, the promise given to Abraham lived on, moving ever closer to its divine fulfillment. The night was deep and still when Jacob gathered his family in silence. The moon cast silver light across the camp, glinting on the herds that filled the valleys. 20 years had passed in the service of Laban, years of deceit, toil, and endurance, yet God had turned every hardship into blessing. Now, at the Lord's command, Jacob was leaving Haran, the land of exile, to return to the land of his fathers. He stood at the edge of the camp, his staff in hand, his heart both anxious and resolute. Behind him, the tent stirred as Rachel and Leah roused the children. No words were spoken, the time for quiet obedience had come. The camels were loaded with treasures, flocks and herds, servants and goods, the fruit of God's favor. The air was cool, the stars bright above the horizon, and the journey began under their silent gaze. Jacob looked back once toward the hills of Haran, their shadows dark against the fading night, and whispered a prayer. O Lord, God of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, you who have said, return to your country, and I will do you good, keep us from the hand of those who might pursue us. Lead us safely to the land you have promised. Then he turned and walked into the desert. For 3 days, they traveled without Laban's knowledge. The children laughed as the caravan moved through valleys and over ridges, unaware of the danger that followed them. But Rachel carried a secret in her heart, and in the packs of her camel. She had taken her father's household idols before they departed, believing perhaps they would bring protection on the road ahead, or perhaps out of some stubborn loyalty to her past. Jacob knew nothing of it, but the decision would soon stir anger and fear. When Laban learned that Jacob had fled, his face turned red with rage. He has stolen my daughters, my grandchildren, and my gods, he shouted. Without delay, he gathered his kinsmen and set out in pursuit, riding hard across the plains. His heart burned not with love, but with greed and wounded pride. Yet God, who had called Jacob forth, would not let Laban's wrath prevail. On the 7th night, as Laban slept beneath the stars, the Lord came to him in a dream. Take heed that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad, the voice of heaven said. Laban awoke trembling, his anger cooled by fear. At dawn, he saw Jacob's camp in the distance. The tents shimmered in the rising sun, and smoke from morning fires curled into the sky. Laban rode forward, his men at his side, and the 2 camps met in the wilderness of Gilead. Jacob stood firm as Laban dismounted, his face hard and unreadable. What have you done, Laban demanded, that you have stolen away unawares, and carried away my daughters as captives? Why did you flee secretly and not tell me, that I might have sent you away with songs and timbrels and harp? And now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to harm you, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, take heed that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. Yet why have you stolen my gods? Jacob's eyes flashed with indignation. Because I was afraid, he answered, for I said, perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. As for your gods, with whomever you find them, let him not live. Search among our things before our brethren, and take what is yours. Laban began to search the tents one by one, Leah's, the servants, and finally Rachel's. But Rachel, knowing the idols were hidden under the saddle of her camel, sat upon it and said, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the custom of women is upon me. Laban searched and found nothing. When he had finished, Jacob's patience broke. He rose before all and cried out, what is my trespass? What is my sin, that you have pursued me? These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts I brought not to you, I bore the loss of it myself. By day the heat consumed me, and by night the frost, and sleep fled from my eyes. I have served you 14 years for your daughters, and 6 years for your cattle, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely you would have sent me away empty. But God has seen my affliction and rebuked you last night. Laban stood silent, his pride wounded by truth. At last, he sighed and said, These daughters are my daughters, these children are my children, and all that you see is mine, yet what can I do this day unto them? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between us. Jacob agreed, and they gathered stones into a heap. Laban called it Jegar-Sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galeed, both meaning heap of witness. Laban said, This heap is a witness between me and you this day. The Lord watch between me and you when we are absent from one another. If you afflict my daughters or take other wives beside them, God is witness. That night they shared a meal beside the heap of stones, and in the morning, Laban rose early. He kissed his daughters and his grandchildren, blessed them, and departed for his home. Jacob watched him go, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The chapter of Haran was closed. He turned his eyes toward Canaan, the land of promise, and knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he was not the same man who had fled from his brother. He was older now, wiser, and touched by the hand of God. As the caravan moved onward, the hills rose before him like waves frozen in stone. The wind carried the scent of the Jordan, and the promise of home grew near. The God of Abraham and Isaac had kept his word, and now, for the first time, Jacob walked not as a fugitive but as a man of destiny. The night was thick with silence as Jacob crossed the river Jabbok. The moon shone faintly on the rippling water, turning it silver as the flocks and servants passed over to the other side. Ahead lay Canaan, the land of promise, his homeland, and somewhere beyond the hills waited Esau, the brother he had deceived 20 years before. Behind him was Haran, a land of deceit and toil, before him, uncertain peace or long-delayed vengeance. His heart trembled between fear and faith. The Lord had told him, Return to your country, and I will be with you, but the shadow of Esau's wrath still haunted his dreams. So that night, Jacob sent his family and all his possessions across the stream, and he remained alone. Alone with his past, alone with his fear, alone with God. The wind whispered through the reeds. Jacob sat upon the bank, his staff beside him, his face turned upward to the stars. O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, he prayed softly, you who said to me, Return to your country and your kindred, and promise to do me good, deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he come and smite me and the mother with the children. You said, I will surely do you good and make your seed as the sand of the sea. O Lord, remember your promise. His voice broke in the darkness, yet the heavens seemed silent. He bowed his head, weary, and felt the weight of the years press upon him. Then, suddenly, he sensed a presence. Out of the shadows, a figure approached, silent, strong, and terrible. Before Jacob could speak, the man seized him, and they fell to the ground in a struggle fierce and unrelenting. The sand flew beneath their feet, the river glimmered beside them like molten glass under the moon. Jacob fought with all his strength, his muscles burning, his breath ragged, yet the stranger did not yield. Hours passed, and the sound of their struggle mingled with the rustle of the night wind. Neither spoke, but Jacob knew this was no ordinary man. The power that surged through the stranger's hands was beyond mortal strength, and yet Jacob would not let go. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the man said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But Jacob, panting and bruised, clung tighter. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man paused. His voice, when he spoke again, was like thunder wrapped in mercy. "What is your name?" "Jacob," he gasped. "The deceiver." The man's hand touched his thigh, and instantly pain shot through him. His hip was dislocated, yet still he held on. Then the man said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have wrestled with God and with men, and have prevailed." The words struck Jacob like fire. Wrestled with God. His heart trembled with awe. The man, no, the Lord himself, had met him face to face, not to destroy him but to transform him. Jacob, broken and limping, felt the rush of divine presence flood his soul. "Tell me your name, I pray," he whispered. But the figure answered, "Why do you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. In an instant, the stranger vanished, and Jacob was left alone with the rising sun. He fell to his knees, gasping, tears mingling with the dust. "I have seen God face to face," he said, "and my life is preserved." He called the place Peniel, the face of God. The dawn grew brighter, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. Jacob rose, leaning upon his staff, his limp marking him forever as a man changed by grace. The pain in his body was sharp, yet his heart was alive with peace. He no longer feared Esau as he once had. The face of his brother no longer loomed as judgment, for he had seen the face of God and survived. That morning, as the camp stirred across the river, Jacob limped forward to meet his destiny. The road stretched before him, winding through hills heavy with dew. His children rode upon camels, the women guiding them gently. In the distance, a cloud of dust rose, the approach of Esau and 400 men. Fear flickered again, but not as before. Jacob arranged his family carefully, sending gifts ahead, herds of goats, sheep, camels, and oxen, as tokens of peace. Then he went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. Each step was heavy, each bow an act of humility, not of fear. Esau came near. Jacob's heart pounded. The air was tense with the weight of 20 years. Then, to his astonishment, Esau ran forward, not with sword, but with open arms. He embraced Jacob, fell upon his neck, and wept. Jacob wept also, clinging to the brother he once deceived. The years of hatred dissolved in that moment like dust in the wind. Esau lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob answered, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Esau smiled and said, "I have enough, my brother, keep what you have." But Jacob insisted, "Please, take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Esau accepted, and peace was restored. Then Esau said, "Let us journey together," but Jacob, mindful of his flocks and children, declined gently. "Go on ahead, my brother, I will follow softly." Esau returned to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth, where he built himself a house and made booths for his cattle. That night, as Jacob sat by the fire, the stars above him blazed brighter than ever. His body still ached from the struggle, but his soul was light. He knew he was no longer Jacob the deceiver, but Israel, the one who wrestled with God and lived. His limp was no shame but a mark of grace, a reminder that every wound received in the presence of God becomes a testimony of His mercy. And so, beneath the vast sky of Canaan, the covenant endured, stronger than fear, greater than guilt, alive through the faith of one who dared to wrestle with God and would not let go. The morning sun rose softly over the hills of Canaan, painting the land with gold as Jacob stood at the entrance of his camp. His flocks grazed in the meadows, his children played in the dust, and his tents fluttered gently in the wind. Yet even as peace surrounded him, a stirring filled his heart, a voice he had heard long ago, at Bethel, when he fled from Esau. It was the same voice that had spoken through dreams and angels, the same God who had wrestled with him beside the river. Now that voice returned, clear and commanding, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother." Jacob bowed his head in reverence. The years had changed him, his limp reminded him daily of the night he met God face to face. He gathered his household together, wives, children, servants, and said, "Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. Let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and was with me in the way which I went." His words carried authority born of experience, and the people listened. Rachel and Leah exchanged glances. The household idols Rachel had once taken from her father were still hidden, forgotten among the possessions. Now, as Jacob spoke, conviction stirred in her heart. She brought them forth silently and laid them before him. The servants followed, giving up their charms and trinkets, symbols of old fears and false hope. Jacob took them all and buried them under the oak tree near Shechem, a quiet act of cleansing and obedience. Then he lifted his staff, and the great caravan began to move once again toward Bethel, the house of God. The journey was long and quiet. Dust rose behind them like a veil, and the sun burned above. But the hand of God was upon them. When fear might have risen, it did not, for the terror of the Lord fell upon the cities around them, and no one pursued them or sought to harm them. Each night, Jacob looked at the stars and remembered the promise spoken to Abraham, to Isaac, and to him, that his descendants would be as countless as the stars. The journey was not only a return to a place, it was a return to the covenant itself. At last, the hills of Bethel came into view. Jacob felt a strange peace fill him as memories flooded back, the stone pillow, the ladder reaching to heaven, the angels ascending and descending, and the voice of God declaring, "I am with you." He had been young then, frightened and uncertain. Now he was older, marked by time and mercy. He dismounted and stood upon the same ground where he once slept as a fugitive, but now he came as a patriarch, a man chosen by God. He built an altar there and called the place El Bethel, meaning God of the house of God. The smoke of the sacrifice rose into the sky, curling like incense toward heaven. As it did, the presence of the Almighty seemed to fill the air around him. The wind shifted, the earth hushed, and Jacob fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the nearness of the Eternal One. He whispered, "You have been my God in every land, my shepherd in every season, my refuge in every storm." But even in this sacred moment, sorrow mingled with joy. As they journeyed from Bethel, tragedy struck. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, who had long been like a mother in Jacob's household, grew weak and died. They buried her under an oak below Bethel, and Jacob named the place Al-Ambakuth, the oak of weeping. He stood by her grave, the tears falling freely, for she was a link to his mother, to home, and to the faith that had guided his steps. Then, once more, God appeared to Jacob. The heavens seemed to open, and the same voice that had spoken years before said again, "Your name is Jacob, your name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." And he blessed him there. "I am God Almighty," said the Lord. "Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall spring from your loins. The land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I give to you, and to your seed after you." Jacob fell with his face to the ground. He had heard these words before, yet this time they struck deeper. He knew now what covenant truly meant. It was not only promise, but perseverance, not only blessing, but trust. When the vision ended, he set up a pillar in the place where God had talked with him, pouring oil upon it as an offering of remembrance. The fragrance rose into the warm air, and he named the place once more Bethel, for God had spoken with him there. When the journey resumed, a quiet melancholy followed the caravan. Rachel, heavy with child, rode beside Jacob. The road to Ephrath was rough, and her pains began to come upon her. She labored long and hard as the camp halted by the wayside. Jacob held her hand as the midwife whispered, "Fear not, you shall have this son also." With her final breath, Rachel bore a son and named him Benoni, son of my sorrow. But Jacob called him Benjamin, son of my right hand. Rachel's eyes closed, and her spirit departed. They buried her there on the way to Ephrath, and Jacob set a pillar upon her grave. As he stood by the tomb, the wind blew softly through the trees. The promise remained, though the cost had been great. He looked to heaven and said, "The Lord has given, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Then he turned his face once more toward Hebron, where his father Isaac yet lived. His steps were slow, his limp more pronounced, but his heart was firm. Bethel had reminded him that every ending in God's plan is but the doorway to a new beginning. The wind was calm over the hills of Mamre as Jacob approached the familiar tents of his father. The scent of oaken pasture filled the air, and the sound of flocks echoed softly in the distance. It had been many years since Jacob had last seen Isaac, and his heart was heavy with both anticipation and humility. Time had worn deep lines into his face, yet his eyes still carried the same kindness Jacob remembered from his youth. As Jacob entered the tent, Isaac lifted his head slowly. "My son," he whispered, his voice frail but steady, "you have returned." Jacob fell to his knees and took his father's trembling hand. "I am here, father," he said softly, tears forming in his eyes. "The Lord has kept me and brought me home." Isaac smiled faintly. "The Lord is faithful," he murmured, his eyes glimmering with recognition and peace. "The promise lives in you now, Jacob, Israel. I knew he would not forsake you." Rebekah was gone, laid to rest long before Jacob's return, but in that tent, father and son spoke for many hours, sharing stories of years and blessings past. Isaac listened as Jacob told of his journey, of Laban's deceit, of his family and flocks, of Peniel, where he wrestled with God and lived. The old man nodded slowly. "You have seen the face of God," he said. You have walked the road of covenant. Remember, my son, that blessing is not only given, it must be carried faithfully. As the days passed, Jacob remained near his father's side. Esau came, too, hearing of their father's frailty. He rode with his sons in herds, his face aged but peaceful. When the two brothers met again, they embraced without hesitation. The years of rivalry and deceit had faded, replaced by the quiet understanding of men who had both wrestled with life and found grace in its trials. Together they tended to Isaac, honoring him in his final days. Often, the two would sit outside the tent at twilight, watching the horizon glow with the setting sun. Isaac's voice grew weaker with each passing day, but his spirit burned strong. One evening, he called both sons to him. "Come near, my sons," he said. Esau stood on one side of the bed, Jacob on the other. Isaac placed a trembling hand upon each of them. "The Lord God of Abraham, before whom I have walked, bless you and your children. You are both my sons, yet the covenant belongs to the one whom God has chosen. Do not let envy or pride tear apart what he has joined. You are brothers, guard that bond, for from your seed shall nations come, and through your brother's line shall all the earth be blessed." His eyes turned toward Jacob, and with his final strength, he whispered, "The God of promise will not fail." That night, as the moon hung low and pale above Hebron, Isaac breathed his last. His face was peaceful, his lips still parted as though he were whispering a prayer. Jacob and Esau buried him beside Abraham and Sarah in the cave of Machpelah. The torches flickered in the cool night wind as they sealed the tomb, and for a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Jacob laid his hand upon the stone and said, "The God of my father has been my shepherd all my life long to this day." Esau nodded silently, his gaze steady on the stars above them. The next morning, Jacob stood alone by the ancient oak that shaded the field of Machpelah. The memories of his father's words echoed within him, the covenant, the faith, the responsibility now his to bear. Around him, the land of Canaan stretched wide and open, rich with promise yet heavy with expectation. He could feel the weight of generations pressing upon his shoulders, the faith of Abraham, the obedience of Isaac, the calling now his to carry forward. Yet there was peace, too, deep and steady, like the rhythm of the earth beneath his feet. Jacob gathered his sons, the 12 pillars of his household, and looked upon them with a mixture of pride and awe. Reuben, the firstborn, stood tall and strong, Judah, fierce and confident, Joseph, the beloved, thoughtful and bright-eyed. Each one would play a part in the unfolding plan of God, though none yet understood how vast that plan would be. "Remember," Jacob said to them, "the Lord is not a God of one man but of generations. Walk before him and be faithful, and he will make your path sure." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob offered a sacrifice upon an altar near Hebron. The smoke rose into the evening sky, curling upward like a prayer. He bowed low and whispered, "O God of my father Isaac, and of my grandfather Abraham, you have been faithful to every word you have spoken. Let your promise endure in my sons and in their sons after them." A warm wind swept through the valley, and for a moment, it felt as though the breath of heaven had touched the earth. That night, Jacob sat outside his tent, the stars blazing above him. The same constellations Abraham once counted now glimmered as a reminder of the unbroken covenant. The promise had passed from father to son, not through wealth or might, but through faith and obedience. Isaac's journey had ended, but the story of Israel had only begun. Jacob closed his eyes and smiled faintly. "The God of my father will be my God forever," he whispered. The flames of the altar flickered in the wind, steady and bright, a symbol of a faith that no death could extinguish. The days in Canaan were bright and fertile, the land stretching like a golden sea beneath the sun. Jacob dwelt in peace now, surrounded by his many sons, the tribes of Israel still growing in the tents of his household. Yet among all his children, one held a special place in his heart, Joseph, the son of his old age, born of his beloved Rachel. Jacob saw in him a reflection of her grace and beauty, and his affection for the boy grew beyond measure. He made for Joseph a coat of many colors, woven with care, each thread shimmering with light. When Joseph walked among his brothers wearing it, the colors caught the sun like fire, and jealousy burned in their hearts. Joseph was young, only 17, but his spirit was alive with wonder and faith. He often tended the flocks with his half-brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, and though he worked hard, he could not ignore their careless ways. When he brought word of their misdeeds to their father, resentment deepened. They began to speak of him with scorn. "Here comes the dreamer," they would say, their eyes narrowing as he approached. Yet Joseph's innocence kept him blind to their malice. His heart was pure, and his faith in God unshaken. One night, as the stars glittered above the hills, Joseph awoke from a dream unlike any other. The air still hummed with its meaning as he ran to his brothers in the morning light. "Listen," he said, excitement bright in his eyes, "I had a dream. We were binding sheaves in the field, and my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to mine." His brothers stared at him, disbelief turning quickly to anger. "Will you indeed reign over us?" they mocked. "Will you truly rule?" Their laughter was bitter, yet the dream lingered in their minds like a thorn. Not long after, another dream came. Joseph stood beneath the night sky, and the moon and stars bent low before him. The next morning, he shared it with his family. "Behold," he said, "I dreamed again, and the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." Jacob frowned, though a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. "Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down to you?" he asked. Yet deep in his heart, Jacob remembered the promises of God and kept the saying in mind. The brothers, however, seethed with envy. Their hatred grew until peace between them was impossible. Days later, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were pasturing the flocks near Shechem. "Go, my son," Jacob said, "and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks. Bring me word again." Joseph set out eagerly, wearing his coat of many colors, unaware that this journey would change his life forever. When he reached Shechem, he did not find them there, but a man told him, "They have gone to Dothan." So Joseph walked on, the sun beating upon his shoulders, the field silent except for the distant bleating of sheep. From afar, his brothers saw him approaching. The bright coat betrayed him long before his face was visible. "Behold," one of them hissed, "the dreamer comes." The others turned, their eyes dark with hatred. "Now is our chance," said another. "Come, let us slay him and cast him into one of the pits. We will say a wild beast has devoured him, and then we shall see what becomes of his dreams." Reuben, the eldest, stepped forward. His conscience stirred. "Shed no blood," he pleaded. "Cast him into this pit in the wilderness, but lay no hand upon him. he planned secretly to rescue Joseph later and return him to their father. When Joseph reached them, he greeted them warmly, his face open and trusting. But they answered him with cruelty. They tore from him the coat of many colors and threw him into a dry pit. The ground was hard, the walls steep, and Joseph's cries echoed up toward the sky, unanswered. Above, his brothers sat down to eat bread, their laughter mingling with the wind as though nothing had happened. While they ate, a caravan appeared on the horizon, traders from Midian, carrying spices, balm, and myrrh to Egypt. Judah's eyes narrowed with cunning. "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood?" he said. "Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." The others agreed. They pulled Joseph from the pit, his face pale with fear, his hands trembling. "Please," he begged, "don't do this." But they turned away, unmoved. The Midianite traders paid 20 pieces of silver, and Joseph was led away in chains, his heart broken, his dreams a fading echo of hope. When Reuben returned to the pit and found it empty, he tore his garments and cried out in despair. "The boy is gone. What shall I do?" His brothers quickly devised a lie. They took Joseph's coat, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the garment in blood. When they brought it to Jacob, they said, "This we have found. Know now whether it is your son's coat or not." Jacob recognized it instantly. "It is my son's coat," he sobbed. "An evil beast has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn in pieces." He rent his clothes and mourned for many days, refusing comfort. "I will go down to my son mourning," he said, and wept until his strength was gone. Far away, the caravan wound its way through the desert toward Egypt. The air shimmered with heat, and Joseph walked behind the camels, bound and silent. His heart was heavy with grief and confusion. The dreams that once filled him with wonder now seemed cruel and distant. Yet even in despair, faith flickered faintly within him. He remembered his father's God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and whispered through his tears, "You are still with me." As the sun set behind the dunes, Joseph lifted his eyes to the horizon. Ahead lay Egypt, vast, foreign, and full of mystery. He could not know that this land of bondage would one day become the stage for redemption, or that the God who seemed silent was even now writing the next chapter of his great promise. The boy who had been sold by his brothers would rise to save them all, but for now, he walked on through the desert night, a prisoner of men yet held in the hand of God. The morning began like any other in the dungeon, dim light filtering through narrow cracks, the air heavy with silence. Joseph was sweeping the floor when hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. The door burst open, and 2 guards entered. One of them, the chief officer, looked at Joseph with urgency. "You there, Hebrew," he said, "Pharaoh summons you." The words hung in the air like thunder. Joseph froze, unsure if he had heard correctly. The officer repeated, "Hurry. Wash yourself and change your garments. Pharaoh wishes to see you at once." His heart began to pound. Could it be? After years of waiting, after the butler's forgetfulness and the silence of heaven, had the moment finally come? They led him from the darkness into blinding light. As he bathed and shaved, the cool water ran down his face, washing away the years of captivity but not the memory of faith. When they dressed him in clean linen, he felt the weight of chains replaced by the weight of destiny. His steps echoed on the marble floors as he was brought through vast corridors adorned with gold and carvings of gods he did not know. The palace of Pharaoh glimmered with power, yet Joseph's heart was calm. For within him burned a greater fear and a greater reverence, the fear of the Lord. He was led into a grand hall. Pharaoh sat upon his throne, surrounded by priests, guards, and counselors. His eyes were sharp, his expression troubled. Before Joseph could bow, Pharaoh spoke. "I have dreamed a dream," he said, "and there is none who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it." Joseph looked up, his voice steady. "It is not in me," he said, "but God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace." The words startled the court. No man spoke of his own God before Pharaoh. But Joseph's confidence was not pride, it was faith. Pharaoh leaned forward and began to tell his dream. "In my vision," he said, "I stood by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored cows and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadow. Then 7 other cows came up after them, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. The ill-favored cows ate up the 7 fat cows, yet when they had eaten them, it could not be known that they had eaten them, for they were still lean and ugly. I awoke, but then I slept again, and behold, I dreamed a second time. 7 ears of corn came up on one stalk, full and good, and behold, 7 thin ears, blasted with the east wind, sprang up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. I told this to the magicians, but none could explain it to me." Joseph listened intently, his eyes lifted slightly as though reading invisible words written in the air. When Pharaoh finished, the room fell silent. Then Joseph spoke, his voice calm and full of certainty. "The dream of Pharaoh is one," he said. "God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years, the dream is one. The 7 lean and ill-favored cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind are 7 years of famine. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and after them shall arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten. The famine shall consume the land, and the abundance shall not be known for the famine following, for it shall be very grievous." And the reason the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. A murmur spread through the court. Pharaoh leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Joseph. "What then shall be done?" he asked. Joseph bowed slightly. "Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint officers over the land and take up a 5th part of the harvest during the 7 plentiful years. Let them gather all the food of those good years and store grain in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, that the land may not perish during the famine." His words hung in the air with the weight of divine wisdom. Pharaoh sat back, deep in thought. Then he looked at his counselors and said, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" None answered. Pharaoh turned to Joseph. "Forasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is none so discreet and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and according to your word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you." The court gasped. In an instant, the slave had become ruler. Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He arrayed him in fine linen and hung a gold chain about his neck. Then he had him ride in the second chariot, and men cried before him, "Bow the knee." From that day, Joseph was no longer a prisoner but a prince of Egypt. Pharaoh gave him a new name, Zaphenath-Paneah, the revealer of secrets, and gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, as his wife. The young Hebrew who had once been sold for silver now ruled over all the land. Yet through all the honor and splendor, Joseph's heart remained humble. When he stood upon the balcony overlooking the fields of Egypt, he whispered to himself, "It is the Lord who raises up and the Lord who brings low. His purpose is greater than man's design." During the years of plenty, Joseph worked tirelessly. Granaries were built in every city, and the harvest overflowed like rivers of gold. The people rejoiced, never knowing that their abundance was the mercy of God preparing them for trial. Joseph traveled across the land, supervising the collection of grain, his name spoken with reverence from the Nile to the desert. When the 7 years of plenty ended, famine came as he had foretold. The earth grew dry, the crops withered, and hunger spread through the nations. Yet in Egypt there was bread. People from every land came to buy food, bowing before the Hebrew ruler who governed with wisdom and compassion. And though they did not know his name or his God, through Joseph they were being saved by the very hand of the Almighty. The sun burned hot above the land of Egypt, and the winds carried with them the dry breath of famine. Beyond the borders, the nations groaned in hunger, and travelers filled the roads that led to the great granaries Joseph had built. Word had spread through every land, there was food in Egypt. Among those who heard were Jacob and his sons in Canaan. Their fields were barren, their flocks thin, their hearts weary. One morning Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another? Behold, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy for us, that we may live and not die." 10 of his sons set out, but Benjamin, the youngest, he kept behind, for fear that harm might come to him. The journey was long and filled with memories they dared not speak. Each brother carried the weight of his own guilt, though none gave it voice. When at last they reached Egypt, they entered the great hall of the governor. The walls shimmered with gold, the air rich with incense. And there, seated in majesty, was Joseph, unrecognized by those who had betrayed him so many years before. His face was older, his bearing royal, his garments fine linen, but his eyes, though calm, burned with the light of remembrance. As they bowed before him with their faces to the ground, the dream he had once dreamed rose in his mind like a vision reborn. "Behold, your sheaves bowed before mine." Joseph's breath caught in his throat. He looked upon them, the very men who had cast him into the pit, and his heart trembled between justice and mercy. Yet he hid his emotion behind the mask of power. "Where do you come from?" he demanded harshly through an interpreter. "From the land of Canaan," they answered, "to buy food." He studied them, then said coldly, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They protested, fear in their voices. "No, my lord, your servants are honest men. We are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in Canaan. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more." Joseph's chest tightened at those words, "One is no more." He turned away for a moment, mastering the storm within him. "This I will test," he said. "By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not leave unless your youngest brother comes here." Send one of you to fetch him, the rest shall be kept in prison. He commanded them to be taken away and confined for 3 days. In the darkness, the brothers spoke among themselves. We are truly guilty concerning our brother, said Reuben, for we saw the anguish of his soul when he begged us, and we would not hear. Therefore this distress has come upon us. They did not know Joseph understood, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. Hearing their remorse, he turned aside and wept. On the 3rd day, Joseph came to them again. His voice was gentler. Do this and live, he said, for I fear God. Let one of your brothers remain bound here, and the rest go and carry food for your families. But bring your youngest brother to me, that your words may be proved true. They agreed, and Joseph chose Simeon to stay behind. He ordered the servants to fill their sacks with grain and secretly return each man's silver into his bag. As they departed, Joseph stood watching them go, his heart aching with love he could not yet reveal. When they came home and opened their sacks, each found his money restored, and fear fell upon them. What is this that God has done to us? They cried. They told Jacob all that had happened, but when they spoke of bringing Benjamin, his face hardened. You have bereaved me of my children, he said. Joseph is gone, and Simeon is gone, and now you would take Benjamin? My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. But the famine grew worse. Their food ran out, and Jacob's heart broke under the weight of hunger. Judah came to him and said, Send the lad with me. I will be surety for him. If I do not bring him back, let me bear the blame forever. At last Jacob relented. Take your brother, he said, and take double money in your hands. God Almighty give you mercy before the man. When they returned to Egypt, Joseph saw Benjamin among them, and his heart leapt within him. He ordered his steward to bring them to his house and prepare a feast. The brothers feared this invitation, thinking it was a trap, but when they entered the house, the steward said, Peace be to you, your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money. Simeon was restored to them, and relief washed over their faces. When Joseph came in, they bowed to the ground again, and he lifted his eyes upon Benjamin, the child of his own mother. His voice trembled as he said, Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke? Then he added softly, God be gracious to you, my son. He turned quickly and left the room, for his compassion overcame him. In his chamber, he wept bitterly, the years of silence and separation pouring out in tears. When he returned, his face was composed once more. They were seated before him according to their birthright, from the eldest to the youngest, and the men marveled among themselves. Portions were set before them, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. They ate and drank, and for the first time in years, laughter filled the air between brothers, though they did not know who sat at the head of the table. As the feast ended, Joseph knew the time of truth was near. He commanded his steward to fill their sacks again with grain and to place his silver cup in Benjamin's bag. When dawn broke and they departed, Joseph sent men after them, accusing them of theft. The cup was found with Benjamin, and the brothers tore their clothes in despair. They returned to the city, fell before Joseph, and Judah pleaded, God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Take me instead of the lad, for I cannot bear to see my father's sorrow if Benjamin is lost. It was enough. Joseph's heart broke at last. He cried out, Cause every man to go out from me. When they were alone, he wept aloud. "I am Joseph," he said, his voice trembling. "Is my father still alive?" The brothers stood speechless, their faces pale with shock. "Do not be grieved or angry with yourselves," Joseph said, "for you sold me, but God sent me before you to preserve life. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." The brothers fell at his feet, weeping. Joseph lifted them up and embraced each of them in turn. "Go," he said, "bring my father down quickly. Tell him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come to me and you shall dwell in safety.'" As they left Egypt with wagons laden with food and gifts, Joseph stood watching the horizon. For the dream given to a boy in Canaan had finally come to pass. What had begun in betrayal now ended in redemption. The house of Israel was restored, and God's promise endured, unbroken, unshaken, eternal.